Explain now. The black man's voice, honed by years of boardrooms, sliced through the stale cabin air. Someone messed up. Badly. Him. Xavier Brooks, CEO, treated like riffraff. But here's the thing. They think it's just about a first-class seat, a perk denied. They haven't a clue. Underneath the Tom Ford suit, injustice coiled. This wasn't about comfort. It was about years of proving worth, battling assumptions. A quiet humiliation he won't swallow. Not this time. Because tucked in his heart, behind the billionaire's armor, beats a quiet promise to leave no one behind. A tiny spark of decency, enough to ignite a revolution. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. No one knew that this man, Xavier Brooks, 40, was the CEO of Sentinel Labs, a multi-billion-dollar cybersecurity empire. To the flight attendant who had shoved him into seat 24C, he was nothing more than a troublesome passenger, clinging to a privilege she believed did not belong to him. Xavier's voice was low, never shouting, yet each word struck with the force of a hammer. In the dim yellow cabin lights, his eyes burned with resolve, the kind born only of those who had endured countless moments of humiliation, yet refused to bow. Passengers whispered around him. Some sighed in annoyance, muttering about another delay. Others stayed quiet, watching closely, sensing this was about far more than a seat. Xavier drew a long breath. For a fleeting moment, childhood memories rushed back. A boy from Southside Chicago, son of a steel worker and a grade school teacher, mistaken for a janitor at his very first executive meeting. The scar still ached, and each dismissal brought it back to life. He had graduated from Northwestern and Harvard Business School, built Sentinel from a rundown rental into a global fortress of code and firewalls. Yet today, holding a first-class ticket with his name boldly printed, they shoved him to the back of the plane under the excuse of weight balancing. A blatant lie. Across the aisle, 31-year-old tech journalist Ethan Park raised his phone. The name Xavier Brooks was no stranger. He knew this was the mind behind the very security system thousands of corporations relied on. A billionaire CEO and economy. Ethan's chest tightened. This was not a seating error. At the front, flight attendant Sandra Keene, 30th and 6th, bit her lip. She had been the one who whispered to the gate agent that this passenger doesn't fit first class. Now it was spiraling beyond her control. Her heart raced, but her face clung to arrogance. Who was he really? Just a man in a sharp suit, but in her eyes not worthy. Javier stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying weight. I don't ask for priority. I don't ask for privilege. I ask for truth. And if truth is buried, then we will all cite it here until it rises. A charge surged through the cabin. Phones appeared, cameras flicked on. The air grew heavy like the silence before a storm. In the cockpit, Captain Patrick O'Neill, 50 of 5, frowned at the report from the lead attendant. Passenger refuses to sit, claims discrimination. He was used to disruptions, but the tone of the report was different this time. Shaken, unsteady. O'Neill knew instinctively this was no small disturbance. This was a media bomb waiting to explode. Xavier remained still, breathing evenly, but inside burned a fire. He thought of his wife, Leanna Brooks, a pediatrician who told him every morning, "Don't let them make you forget your worth." He thought of the hundreds of young employees at Sentinel, many black like him, many who had been doubted for no reason other than where they came from. If he backed down today, what lesson would that teach them? That silence was the only way to survive. A little girl by the window whispered to her mother, "Mom, why is that man standing? Don't they let him sit in the nice seats?" The mother pulled her close, eyes torn between pity and fear. Ethan Park hit publish. The tweet blazed onto screens. Sentinel Labs CEO Xavier Brooks forced out of first class with excuse weight balancing. Seat 2A empty. Hashtag grounded by bias. Notifications flared instantly. A wave had begun. Xavier knew it now. This was no longer about one seat. It was about dignity, about principle, about the truth that a black man, no matter how high he climbed, was still asked to prove he was worthy. He lifted his head, eyes sweeping the rows until they fixed on the door to first class, where seat 2A sat vacant, gleaming like a challenge. In that moment, everyone understood. This was not an ordinary passenger. He was a storm forming right before their eyes. And as the cabin door sealed shut, what began as a routine business trip had become a confrontation destined to shake an entire industry. Morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, flooding the Atlanta penthouse with golden light. The room glowed, but Xavier Brooks' mind churned like an undercurrent. At 44, he held what many called the American dream, not just a tech company, but a cybersecurity Sentinel Labs. From nothing, he had turned an idea in a rundown rental into a multi-billion-dollar corporation that guarded the data of the world's largest organizations. Before the mirror, Xavier carefully adjusted the Windsor knot of his burgundy tie. The glass reflected a man with a broad forehead, hair just beginning to silver at the temples, eyes both stern and seasoned. A Tom Ford suit framed his athletic build, preserved since his days as a college basketball player. On his wrist gleamed a PC Philippe watch, the gift he had bought himself when Sentinel signed its very first multi-million-dollar contract. But today was not like every other day. Today, he was flying to San Francisco to finalize the Horizon Dynamics deal, a $300 million agreement that could define the future of his company. His phone buzzed. On the screen, Nora Patel, Sentinel's COO and his partner since the beginning. He tapped speaker as he packed documents into a leather case. "Everything in order, boss." Nora's voice came with the click of keyboards in the background. "In order. What about Horizon? Legal has cleared all terms. No surprises left. But their CTO still wants to keep the company independent." Xavier smiled. He knew the type. Brilliant with code, but resistant to being absorbed. "Don't worry, I'll speak with him directly. Paper doesn't dissolve resistance, but people can." Nora laughed softly. "Classic you. We've arranged everything. Hotel, car service, board meetings. You just need to land in San Francisco. Then let's write the next chapter for Sentinel," Xavier said, ending the call. In the silence that followed, memories of Chicago rose up. His father, James Brooks, calloused hands from double shifts at the steel plant. His mother, Elelanina, an elementary school teacher, patiently correcting spelling mistakes in his homework. Every night they reminded him, "You can lose everything, but no one can ever take knowledge from you." His path had never been smooth. With a Harvard MBA and impeccable performance, he had still watched less experienced white colleagues climb the ladder past him. He remembered his first leadership meeting, mistaken for a janitor. That humiliation etched itself into him, fueling the creation of Sentinel. Not just to prove himself, but to declare, "We belong at this table." A notification pinged. Time to depart. Xavier grabbed his case and stepped into the private elevator to the ground floor. The doors opened to reveal Leon Harris, his longtime driver, waiting beside a gleaming black Tesla Model S. "Good morning, Mr. Brooks. Big day today." Xavier smiled faintly. "Every day matters, Leon, but yes, today is special." The car slipped into the packed lanes of Atlanta's freeway. Leon glanced in the mirror. "Southgate at the airport is under construction, but we'll make it on time." Xavier nodded, eyes fixed on his tablet. Charts and projections flashed, outlining the integration of company cultures post-merger. He knew 300 million was just a number. Without cultural alignment, everything could collapse into dust. Outside, the Atlanta skyline shimmered in the morning light. This was the city he had chosen for Sentinel's headquarters, not only for its infrastructure, but because it carried the legacy of the civil rights movement. His success was a message to the next generation. People of color could lead global technology. "Mr. Brooks, when's your return flight?" Leon asked. "Tomorrow. If all goes well, we'll celebrate a new chapter." He paused, catching Leon's eye in the mirror. "And Leon, thank you. You always get me to the right place at the right time." "Just doing my job, sir." "And doing it exceptionally," replied quietly. The Tesla turned into Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. His heartbeat slowed. The day had arrived. Through the years, he had mastered the art of remaining calm under every scrutinizing glance. But what he could not anticipate was that today's greatest challenge would not be in Horizon's boardroom. It was waiting for him at the boarding gate. And this business trip would not be only a deal, it would become a public battle for dignity. The glass doors of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport opened, and the Monday morning crowd poured in like a flood. Wheels of suitcases rattled. Announcements echoed overhead. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the cold, metallic scent of the vast space. Xavier Brooks walked with steady steps, pulling his cabin bag. In his hand was a first-class ticket, seat 2A, clearly printed, a seat that had been purchased, confirmed, fully paid. At the first-class check-in, the line was shorter, the carpet deep blue, the signage glowing. A young agent with a name tag reading Amber Davis looked up, her eyes widening for a moment as she saw the name on her screen. Mr. Brooks, I just read the Business Insider piece on Sentinel Labs. I really admire the AI security technology your company is developing. Xavier gave a small nod, his smile genuine. For once, he was recognized for what he had built, not judged for how he looked. Thank you, Amber. Just my carry-on. I'm not checking bags. Of course, sir. Seat 2A, gate B23, first class. The lounge is near B12. Have a great flight. As Amber printed his boarding pass, an older colleague at the counter beside her cast a longer glance than necessary. His eyes scanned Xavier's suit thread by thread, as though questioning whether this black man truly belonged in the priority line. And Xavier recognized that look instantly. He had seen it all his life. A look of doubt. A look that silently challenged his right to belong. He said nothing, only smiled, took the boarding pass, and walked on. But his steps grew heavier. At security, the pre-check line for priority passengers moved quickly. When it was his turn, the screener held his ticket and ID longer than usual. A frown appeared. Sir, please step aside for additional screening. Is there a problem? Xavier asked evenly. He already knew the answer. Random selection, sir. Random, a word he had heard too many times. Random. So frequent it was no longer random at all while a few white businessmen breezed past. He was scanned again, his bag rifled through. 10 minutes ticked by, his Patek Philippe watch caught the boarding time on the overhead monitor. 10 minutes here could cost a $300 million deal. At last, they waved him through. No apology, only a curt nod. As he walked, his eyes met those of a young black security officer. The man gave a subtle nod, his gaze heavy with understanding. No words were needed. The message was clear. I know, I've been there too. Moving on, Xavier paused when he saw an elderly couple fumbling at the departures board. The man, gray-haired, raised a hand. Hey son, can you tell us where gate C42 is? We're running late. Xavier looked down at himself. A $3,000 suit, polished leather bag, no name tag, no uniform. Yet to them, he looked like staff. I don't work here, sir, Xavier replied calmly, but walk straight down this hall, then turn left. You'll see the train to Concourse C. The wife leaned close, whispering something. The husband quickly said, Sorry, we thought it's fine. Xavier cut him off with a smile, then turned away. A cold smile that hit a knife driven deep. At gate B15, a young man in a service uniform froze when he saw him. His tag read, Jamal Owens. Mr. Brooks, Sentinel Labs. Xavier stopped, nodded. Yes, that's me. I'm studying computer science at Georgia State. My cousin was the first in our family to go to college thanks to your foundation scholarship. Thank you. The tightness in Xavier's chest eased. How is she doing? She's excelling, sir, but I'm studying too. Working and studying. Sometimes I feel exhausted. Some people still think I'm not good enough just because. Jamal trailed off, his eyes glistening, placed a hand on his shoulder. This field will test you twice as hard, but remember, excellence is your armor. Document everything you achieve. Build a record no one can deny and find a mentor you can trust. He pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to Jamal. Email my office. We have a flexible internship program. It might fit your schedule. Jamal's eyes lit up. Really? Thank you, sir. We only rise by lifting each other, Xavier said, gripping the young man's hand firmly. Leaving Jamal, he passed a bookstore. As he reached for a copy of Harvard Business Review, he felt eyes trailing him. The Claire watched every step, suspicion in his stare. But when Xavier pulled out a platinum card to pay, the man blinked in surprise. Outside, his phone buzzed, a message from his wife. L. Remember, don't forget the most important thing. Just a single heart emoji, but for them, it was enough. At gate B23, passengers clustered near boarding. A flight attendant stared directly at him. Sandra Keene. She leaned toward a colleague, whispered something, then glanced back at him. Her lips smiled, but her eyes were cold. Xavier sat in the first-class waiting area. Then he heard Sandra's voice, sharp, bitter, carrying clearly behind him. First-class standards are getting worse. Anyone can sit up here now, no matter how they look. The words dropped like a stone into the already tense air. Xavier flipped through his magazine, masking the familiar sting, the ache of being judged, an unwelcome beginning he had not expected. But deep inside he knew. Today they had chosen the wrong man to underestimate. The loudspeaker crackled to life. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now boarding Atlantic Airways Flight 25 to San Francisco. First-class passengers and platinum members, please proceed to gate B23. The crowd began to shift. Xavier Brooks rose, cabin bag in hand, his first-class boarding pass clearly marked seat 2A. He drew a deep breath, straightened his collar, and stepped into the priority line. Ahead of him, 3 white passengers, a middle-aged couple and a man in a golf polo, were processed quickly, each met with warm smiles from the agent. When his turn came, Xavier handed over his pass. Colin Webb, a 33-year-old gate agent, offered a mechanical smile, but his eyes dimmed as he glanced at the screen. His brows furrowed, hesitation stretching longer than it should. "Hello, Mr. Brooks. There seems to be a small issue with your ticket." "What issue?" "This is a first-class boarding pass. Seat 2A. It's just a verification step. Please step aside for a moment." The line behind him began to bunch up. Impatient murmurs is rising. Xavier's voice remained calm. "Can you explain it here?" "I don't want to hold up the line." Colin forced a smile, though his face was tense. He glanced quickly over his shoulder where flight attendant Sandra Keene stood watching. She leaned in, whispering something into his ear. Her eyes flicked toward Xavier, cold and sharp. Colin turned back. "I'm sorry, sir. The system indicates we need to adjust seating for weight balance. You'll be reassigned to seat 24C in Economy Plus. We apologize for the inconvenience and have arranged a seat with extra legroom." In that moment, heat surged through Xavier's face. Weight balance. A flimsy excuse he had heard too many times, always a veil for something else. He kept his voice controlled. "I purchased and paid for first class. This is an important business trip. I do not accept a downgrade without clear justification. Let me speak to a supervisor." Colin faltered. "We're closing the flight shortly. If you wish to file a complaint, please do so with customer service after landing. For now, I need you to accept the new seat so we don't delay departure." Around them, passengers whispered. Some shook their heads in sympathy. Others looked annoyed at the delay. Xavier knew these looks too well. If he resisted, he would be branded the disruptive black man. If he stayed silent, he would lose what was rightfully his. He pressed each word. "I want to see documentation proving this decision." Colin avoided his gaze. "I don't have the details, sir. This came from operations." Sandra stepped forward, her voice dripping with sugar, though her eyes stayed icy. "Please accept the new seat. Economy Plus is still comfortable for such a short flight." For a fleeting moment, her lips curved in triumph. The pressure of the long line behind forced Xavier's choice. His grip tightened on the handle of his bag, the fire in his chest burning hotter. Finally, he accepted the new boarding pass for 24C. But his eyes never left Sandra. They were not the eyes of a man conceding, but of one recording every false smile, every lie, committing it all to memory. As he walked the jet bridge, Xavier passed through first class. Warm golden light, wide leather seats. He counted the rows. Seat 2A, his seat still empty. No one had taken it. At that moment, his eyes met those of Talia Monroe, a black flight attendant serving in first class. Her gaze dropped to the economy ticket in his hand, then flicked to the empty 2A. She gave a subtle nod, a signal unspoken. "I know what is happening, and I stand with you." Xavier clenched his jaw and continued silently toward the back of the plane. Row 24C was cramped, wedged between strangers. He placed his bag above, sat down, his pulse pounding. His mind raced with calculations, when to resist, how to speak without being removed. The man beside him turned, glasses reflecting the cabin light. "Excuse me, are you Xavier Brooks, CEO of Sentinel Labs?" Xavier nodded, slightly caught off guard. "I'm Ethan Park, tech journalist. I interviewed your creative director last month. But why are you sitting here? I just passed through first class and saw 2A empty." The words cut like a knife. Xavier gave a thin smile, his voice cold. "They said it was for weight balance." "That's impossible," Ethan frowned. "I could take a picture of that seat. This isn't just a mistake." He raised his phone, snapped a photo of first class. The screen showed it clearly. Seat 2A, empty. He turned back to Xavier, whispering, "This needs to be exposed right now." Xavier stared at the image, hot blood rushing through his veins. He understood. Then Flight 2517 would not just carry him to San Francisco to close a deal. It was about to become a battlefield where he would have to stand, not just for himself, but for everyone ever pushed away from the place they rightfully belonged. Seat 24C was crammed between two strangers. The space was suffocating, his knees pressed tight against the seat in front, his shoulders bumping against the elbows of those beside him. Overhead, the yellow cabin lights cast a dull glow, making Xavier Brooks' Tom Ford suit look out of place, like a VIP forced into a crowded bus. He closed his eyes for a moment and drew a deep breath. Stay calm. Think like a chess match. Don't let them turn you into the disruptive passenger. But his heart pounded, blood rushing hot against the mask of calm he wore. On his right, the man with thick glasses kept glancing his way. Ethan Park, the tech journalist, leaned closer and whispered, "Mr. Brooks, I just posted this photo on the Twitter. Look." The screen lit up, showing seat 2A completely empty with the caption, "Curious why Sentinel Labs CEO Xavier Brooks is sitting in economy while his first-class seat remains vacant." Atlantic Airways, how do you explain weight balancing? Beneath it, notifications exploded. Several major tech accounts had already shared it. Within minutes, hundreds of likes and comments rolled in. The hashtag grounded by bias sparked like tinder in a dry forest. Xavier stared at the screen, emotions clashing inside him, anger and doubt colliding. This was a $300 million deal. Horizon Dynamics waiting in San Francisco. A public scandal could derail everything. Yet the echo of the past pressed on him. There are times when silence is the same as complicity. He opened his eyes, staring forward. Through the narrow gap between the seats, first class glowed bright, passengers sipping champagne over white linen. And there it was, seat 2A, still empty, mocking him. A familiar figure passed by, Talia Monroe, the black flight attendant. Her eyes flicked toward him. Then she deliberately dropped a napkin onto his tray. When he unfolded it, his chest tightened. It was a small print out of the passenger manifest. His name, seat 2A, with no changes listed. In the corner, scrolled in pen. This isn't right. Xavier gripped the paper, feeling fire ignite inside. He wasn't alone. Someone on the inside had seen and acknowledged the truth. The soft tapping of phone keys. Ethan was still updating, his eyes bright. The post is spreading fast. Tech leaders are tagging Atlantic Airways. They can't stay silent much longer. "Ethan," Xavier murmured, calm but firm. "This isn't about a seat. It's a test of dignity." On his left, the man who had been silent until now shifted and leaned closer. "Sorry, I couldn't help overhearing. What they did was wrong. I saw them hold you at the gate. I'll testify if needed." Evia nodded, sensing a small wave of support spreading through the cabin. The intercom buzzed, announcing final boarding. Xavier closed his eyes, hearing his father's voice. Sometimes silence is just a ticket for them to repeat injustice again. His mother's words followed. Teach through action, not just words. Ethan's phone lit up again. He showed Xavier the screen. The post had passed 20,000 interactions. The hashtag #groundedbybias was climbing the trending list. Now industry leaders were chiming in. If this is true, Atlantic Airways will pay dearly. Xavier inhaled deeply. He knew if he stayed silent, the hashtag would fade into a sigh on social media. But if he stood up, it could strike at the core of an industry too used to looking away. A flight attendant's voice rang out firmly. Please fasten your seatbelts. We are preparing for departure. Xavier placed his hand on the belt, but he did not click it. In his chest, he knew the moment of choice had come. He could sit quietly, land safely, and pursue the 300 hell million Mahal dollar deal. Or he could stand risk everything, removal, humiliation, even his career. But he also knew if not now, then when? And if not him, then who? Xavier opened his eyes, his gaze sharp as steel. He unlatched the belt, laid the napkin with the manifest flat on the tray. His body rose, tall and commanding, every eye locked on him. The cabin, once buzzing, fell silent, broken only by the hum of the engines. "Excuse me!" His voice rang clear, each word cutting through the air. "I need to speak with the captain. There is a serious issue that must be addressed before we leave the ground." Ethan tilted his phone, the camera rolling, recording every second. In that moment, Flight 25 was no longer just a journey from Atlanta to San Francisco. It had become an arena where one man treated as less would force the world to confront the truth, and the storm at last had begun. The metallic click of an unfastened seatbelt echoed through the silent cabin, like the signal to begin. Every eye in economy turned toward Xavier Brooks. He stood tall, broad-shouldered, blocking the aisle, his voice resonant but never shouting. "I need to speak with the captain right now." The air trembled. A few passengers raised their phones to record. A middle-aged man nearby whispered, "Oh God, this is going to blow up." From the front, flight attendant Sandra Keene, 34 and 6, strode quickly down the aisle, her face tense, her voice sharp and shrill. "Sir, return to your seat and fasten your belt immediately. The plane is preparing for takeoff. You are obstructing flight safety." Xavier met her gaze, his eyes like cold steel. "No, I am not obstructing. I am requesting to speak with the captain. The first-class seat I purchased remains empty while I was forced into economy under a fabricated excuse. This is clear discrimination." Sandra's face flushed, her tone cutting like a knife. "If you do not comply, we will call security. You will be removed from this flight." A wave of murmurs spread through the cabin. A white woman seated in first class, having overheard, stood and spoke out. "This is outrageous. I just walked past. Seat 2A is completely empty. Why is he not allowed to sit there?" Sandra shot her a look, her face briefly faltering, but she snapped back. "Please do not interfere. This is a technical issue." Ethan Park, the journalist seated beside Xavier, raised his voice clearly. "I am a technology reporter. I photographed the empty seat and I am streaming live. This is no longer a technical issue. This is open discrimination." Sandra froze. The cabin erupted into whispers, gasps, and the glow of raised phones. An elderly man in row 26 spoke up. "I fly this route weekly. I have never once seen weight balance used to move passengers after boarding. Not once." Xavier stepped forward. He was not angry, not threatening, but the determination in his eyes silenced the cabin. "I will not leave this flight. I will not return to an economy seat. I will only accept an explanation from the highest authority on this plane." The captain Sandra opened her mouth to protest, but just then the cockpit door swung open. Grace Lynn, the 34-year-old first officer, stepped out. Her voice was calm, though strained. "What is happening here? We cannot depart with a passenger standing in the aisle." Turned to her, his tone unwavering. "My name is Xavier Brooks. I purchased first-class seat 2A. I was forced into economy under the excuse of weight balance, while that seat remains empty. I demand an explanation from the captain." Grace hesitated, her eyes catching on the napkin Xavier had placed on the tray table, the manifest printed with his name and seat 2A. She was silent for a moment, then nodded. "I'll call the captain." Sandra's voice rose in panic. "Grace, don't! We are already late. Better late than airborne in this condition." Grace cut her off coldly. Moments later, Patrick O'Neill, the 55-year-old captain, emerged. Tall salt and pepper hair, the commanding presence of a man used to authority. He scanned the scene, his deep voice filling the cabin. "What is going on here?" Sandra rushed to answer. "Captain, this passenger is refusing his assigned seat and disrupting the flight." Xavier lifted both boarding passes, one showing first class, the other economy. His voice was steady, ringing through the silent cabin. I am not refusing my assigned seat. I am refusing deceit. This is my original first-class ticket, seat 2A. That seat remains empty. No documentation proves this reassignment was necessary. I have been discriminated against, and I will not stay silent. His words fell heavy as a gavel strike. Captain O'Neill frowned, taking the manifest from Talia Monroe's hand, scanning it quickly before raising his eyes, now dark and stormy. He turned to Sandra, his voice firm. "Is it true that Mr. Brooks was issued seat 2A?" Sandra stammered. "Yes, but ground operations said." Patrick cut her off. "Enough! I need the gate agent here immediately." Murmurs rippled across the cabin. Some passengers began to clap. Ethan Park whispered into his phone, "This is live." The hashtag #GroundedByBias is already trending at the top of the region. Xavier stood tall, not triumphant, not rushing. In his chest spread a strange calm. He knew this battle had already outgrown a single airplane seat. It had become a declaration of war on the system itself. Sandra lowered her head, sweat beating at her temple. Xavier lifted his chin, his eyes burning with resolve. If he was forced off this flight today, then at least the entire world would know why. And in that moment, the line between an ordinary journey and a historic turning point was erased forever. The air inside the cabin was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Captain Patrick O'Neill kept his voice stern. "Call the gate agent here immediately." Minutes later, hurried footsteps echoed down the jet bridge. Colin Webb, the gate agent, appeared. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. The passenger manifest clutched tightly in his hand. Patrick pointed straight at Xavier. "Can you explain why this passenger with a clear first-class ticket was forced into economy while seat 2A remains empty?" Colin swallowed hard, his eyes darting away. "Captain, the system flagged a weight balance issue, so we thought it was best to make an adjustment." Talia Monroe, the black flight attendant, stepped forward, holding up her tablet with the manifest on display. Her voice was sharp, every word like a blade. "There was no such alert. I just checked directly. Mr. Brooks is clearly listed in seat 2A. No other passenger was reassigned, only him." A low murmur spread across the cabin. An older male passenger in row 3 shot to his feet. "I fly this route every week. Never once have I seen weight balance used to force a seat change right at boarding." This was clearly deliberate. Colin was speechless, the weight of every eye in the cabin pressing down on him. Behind him, Sandra Keene tried to interject, her voice sharp. "This is just a misunderstanding. We shouldn't blow it out of proportion," but it was far too late. Ethan Park raised his phone, his voice clear and firm. "I have already posted the entire incident, the empty seat, the manifest, all of it. The hashtag #GroundedByBias is trending nationwide. Tens of thousands of people are watching." Colin's face turned ashen. Patrick turned to Sandra, his eyes blazing with anger. "Were you involved in this decision?" Sandra hesitated, darting a glance at Colin before stammering softly. "I only suggested that it should be re-verified," because her voice trailed off. But the implication was clear to everyone in the cabin. A black woman seated in economy stood, her voice trembling but strong. "This isn't the first time. I've been asked for my ticket 3 times on a flight, while the white passenger next to me just flashed theirs once." A younger man in a gray suit added, "I'm a labor lawyer. These testimonies are more than enough to establish a pattern of discriminatory behavior." The pressure swelled like a tidal wave. Patrick O'Neill exhaled heavily, his eyes locking on Colin and Sandra. "You two have created a situation that threatens not only this airline, but the integrity of the entire industry." In that moment, Ethan's phone buzzed furiously. He looked up, his voice excited. "Breaking news. CNN and Reuters have picked up the story. They're running it as breaking. A CEO forced out of first class due to discrimination. This has moved beyond Twitter." Xavier remained standing tall, his hand gripping the manifest that Talia had given him. But inside, his heart pounded not with fear, but with the realization that this time the truth would not be buried in the shadows. This time, the whole world was watching. He drew a deep breath, his voice steady, calm, yet sharp as steel. "I am not seeking privilege. I am seeking fairness. If I stay silent today, tomorrow there will be dozens, hundreds of passengers treated the same way. Enough. This must be the last time. Thunderous applause erupted from the rear of the cabin. Several passengers shouted out, "That's right. Give him back his seat. We're with you." Sandra's face drained of color as she stepped back, her lips trembling, unable to form words. Colin bowed his head, trembling, avoiding every accusing gaze. Patrick raised a hand, signaling for quiet, then turned to Xavier. "Mr. Brooks, on behalf of the airline, I apologize for what has happened, but I must coordinate with higher management before making a final decision." At that moment, a voice rang out over the crew intercom. "Captain O'Neill, this is Martin Alvarez, ground supervisor. I'm boarding now with Olivia Grant, regional director. We need to talk." All eyes turned toward the aisle. Two new figures entered, their faces stern, their eyes sweeping across the cabin. The plane had become a stage for a confrontation far greater, where those who once hid behind the excuse of technicalities were about to have their masks ripped away before dozens of raised cameras. And Xavier, still standing firm in the aisle, knew this was only the beginning. The real storm was rising, no longer confined to a single flight, but reaching into the very heart of an entire industry. The cockpit door closed behind Xavier Brooks, and the cramped flight deck instantly transformed into an emergency boardroom. In front of him sat Captain Patrick O'Neill, First Officer Grace Lynn, Ground Supervisor Martin Alvarez, and Regional Director Olivia Grant. The dim glow of the control panels lit their tense faces like a closed-door trial. The airline satellite phone was on speaker, and a sharp female voice cut through. "This is Rebecca Sanderson, Eastern Regional Director for Atlantic Airways. Mr. Brooks, first I want to extend my apologies." Xavier placed the manifest Talia had given him on the console, his tone calm, but with a blade hidden in every word. "Apologies are not enough. The fact is, my first-class seat was left empty. I was forced into economy with a fabricated excuse. And I am not the first," Olivia Grant interjected, her voice clipped. "Mr. Brooks, we will investigate, but the plane is nearly an hour late. Perhaps this can be addressed once we land." Xavier cut her off, his words striking like a hammer. "No, this happened in public in front of hundreds of witnesses. It will be addressed publicly right here." Patrick O'Neill looked at Olivia, then nodded. He had flown for decades, but he had never seen a moment like this. The world was watching. Rebecca's voice returned over the line. "Mr. Brooks, we are aware you are the CEO of Sentinel Labs. I've also been informed your company is in the process of acquiring Horizon Dynamics. Coincidentally, Atlantic Airways is considering a new cybersecurity partner. Sentinel is on that list." A tense silence fell. Olivia's brow furrowed. Martin glanced away and Patrick pressed his lips together. Xavier stared straight at the phone, his voice ringing clear. "If you are suggesting that I will be treated better because my company could sign a contract, then you have misunderstood me. I am not asking for favoritism. I am demanding change." Rebecca paused for several seconds, then her voice softened. "Then what do you want?" Xavier sat tall, his eyes sharp. This was no longer about a passenger. It was the moment of a leader. "I want Atlantic Airways to commit to 3 things right now. First, mandatory Antibius training for all frontline employees. Second, a transparent system to log and handle discrimination complaints. Third, the creation of a diversity advisory council with real authority to oversee company policy." He paused, scanning the faces in the cockpit before continuing. "And Sentinel Labs is ready to provide the technical solution to track and report this data free of charge. Not because I want a contract, but because I want to ensure this never happens again." Patrick leaned back in his chair, a flicker of respect in his eyes. Grace Lynn gave a subtle nod as if she were witnessing a strategic presentation rather than a mid-air dispute. Martin Alvarez shook his head. "Mr. Brooks, what you propose would require enormous resources and time. It cannot be promised on the spot." Xavier fired back, his tone cold as steel. "More costly than the 3% your stock just lost in the past hour, because the hashtag "Your Shana grounded by bias" is exploding nationwide." The question landed with the weight of an anvil. Olivia glanced down at her phone, her face paling as the CNN alert flashed. "Black CEO forced out of first class." Atlantic Airways faces discrimination scandal. Rebecca's voice came again. Changed now, no longer rigid, but edged with concession. Mr. Brooks, I hear you. I will take your proposal to the executive board, but this flight must depart. If you agree to return to your first-class seat, we will release a statement immediately pledging a full review and reforms. Xavier nodded slowly. I agree on one condition. The statement must be public before this plane leaves the ground. The passengers here are witnesses. They deserve transparency. Patrick turned to Martin and Olivia, his voice steady. I agree. If this is not resolved now, the crisis will only deepen before we are airborne. Silence held the room. Then Rebecca exhaled, her final words heavy with resignation. Very well. I will draft the statement now. Mr. Brooks, please return to seat 2A. This story will not end here, but it will begin a true change. Xavier closed his eyes briefly, exhaling deeply. He knew the battle was far from over, but he had shifted the balance, no longer a lone passenger against a flight attendant. He was now confronting the system itself and forcing it to yield. He turned and stepped on out of the cockpit. Beyond the door, dozens of eyes waited, and as it swung open, a thunderous applause erupted like rolling thunder. Thunderous applause filled the cabin as Xavier Brooks stepped out of the cockpit. It was not the kind of cheer heard at a concert, but the steady heartbeat of people who had witnessed injustice and finally saw someone stand against it. He stood tall in the aisle, his broad shoulders squared. The first-class ticket in his hand was no longer just a slip of paper. It had become a symbol of truth affirmed. Talia Monroe stepped forward, offering him a cold bottle of water. Her voice was soft yet clear. Thank you, sir, on behalf of all of us. Xavier gave a small nod, his eyes falling on Sandra Keene. The flight attendant's head was bowed, her hands clenched tightly, unable to meet his gaze. Colin Webb, the gate agent, sat hunched in the jump seat, sweat streaming down his face. Xavier walked slowly toward the first-class cabin. With every step, he heard the whispers. He did the right thing. It's about time someone stood up. Unbelievable. This still happens in 2024. A little girl in a middle seat waved timidly. Mister, I hope you win. Xavier bent down, gave her a warm smile, then moved on. Seat 2A glowed, waiting. He sat down, the soft leather enveloping him. But it felt different from every other flight. This was no longer a seat bought with money. It was a seat reclaimed with resolve. His phone buzzed nonstop. A message from Nora Patel, COO of Sentinel Labs, flashed on the screen. Xavier, you're on every news outlet. Stay calm. The board fully supports you. Another call came from Horizon Dynamics, the company at the center of the $300 million deal. He answered, the CEO's voice brimming with enthusiasm. Mr. Brooks, I just saw the news. Honestly, we're impressed. A leader who stands up for principle. That's exactly the kind of partner we want. Let's move up the meeting. We'd like to see you sooner. Xavier smiled faintly, his heart surging. What could have derailed the deal had become his advantage. Sometimes risking a battle meant winning the war. Behind him, Ethan Park was still typing furiously, his eyes glowing as if he had struck journalistic gold. Passing seat 2A, he whispered, Mr. Brooks, this isn't just a story, it's the headline. I want an exclusive interview when we land. Xavier returned his smile. We'll talk in San Francisco. A male flight attendant lifted the intercom, his voice unsteady but heavy with meaning. Ladies and gentlemen, Atlantic Airways apologizes for the serious incident earlier. On behalf of Captain O'Neill, we commit to a thorough investigation and corrective action. We thank you for your patience. Applause broke out again, not raucous but solemn. A witness's seal that they had seen, they had heard, and they would remember. Xavier leaned back, exhaling a long breath. Through the window, Atlanta's runway shimmered in the late sunset. The aircraft began to taxi, slow and steady. His phone buzzed once more. A message from Leanna Brooks, his wife. I'm watching. I'm proud. This is why I chose you from the very start. He closed his eyes, letting the emotions wash over him. All his life he had swallowed 1,000 small humiliations. But today he chose differently, and the world had seen it. Captain Patrick O'Neill's voice filled the cabin as the plane accelerated. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are not only departing for San Francisco, we are departing toward a fairer future where every passenger is treated with dignity. Atlantic Airways is committed to change. Thank you for flying with us. The aircraft lifted off, Atlanta shrinking behind them. In that moment, Xavier understood that the $300 million deal was no longer the most important news of the day. More important was the invisible contract he had signed with society, that he would never again stay silent in the face of injustice. Ethan leaned over. Mr. Brooks, did you know the hashtag hat, grounded by bias, has surpassed 2 million mentions in just 1 hour? You've started a movement. Xavier looked out the window at the vast stretch of blue sky. His voice was low, steady. Sometimes the most important flight doesn't just take you to a city, it takes the whole world to a new destination. Justice. The aircraft soared into the clouds, leaving Atlanta small and distant. Ahead lay a wide-open future where one reclaimed seat could become a torch, lighting the path for millions. 6 months after the fateful Flight 247, the blinding lights of the Chicago Convention Center reflected across the face of Xavier Brooks. More than 3,000 people filled the hall. Tech leaders, investors, young students with burning ambition, all fell silent as he stepped onto the stage. On the massive LED screen behind him, the words glowed. Integrity is non-negotiable. Famja Kung Maka. Xavier's voice resonated deep and warm, yet carrying the force of fire. Innovation is not only about writing new lines of code. Innovation is about daring to rewrite realities that have decayed. 6 months ago, I stood up on a flight, not to claim a seat, but to reclaim dignity for all of us. Applause roared, then quickly hushed as if the audience wished to preserve the solemnity of the moment. In the front row, Nora Patel, now executive chair of Sentinel Labs, nodded quietly with pride. Beside her sat Ethan Park, the tech journalist who had turned the story of Flight 25551 into a series of reports that won national awards. It was not just Sentinel that had changed. The entire airline industry was forced to shift after a media firestorm. Atlantic Airways was compelled to implement every demand Xavier had made. Every frontline employee was required to undergo anti-bias training. A transparent reporting system for discrimination complaints was established with data published quarterly. A diversity advisory council was created, empowered with the authority to veto unjust policies. And perhaps most notably, Talia Monroe, the flight attendant who had courageously spoken up, was appointed vice president of passenger equity. Sandra Keene, the flight attendant who had played a role in the incident, was dismissed. Yet instead of disappearing, she returned to school, studied labor relations, and later became a speaker on recognizing unconscious bias. A strange irony. The one who once inflicted harm became a living witness to change. Colin Webb, the gate agent, after a month of training and facing the consequences, was retained. He joined the Employee Advisory Council and sent a handwritten letter to Xavier. That day I was a coward. But because of you, I learned the value of saying no to what is wrong. The story of Flight 2517 spread even further. 3 other major airlines immediately rolled out bias reporting systems powered by Sentinel technology. Other service industries, banks, hotels, retail chains began studying the Brooks Standard as a new benchmark of fairness in customer experience. Xavier's speech continued, his cadence rising, each sentence striking like a hammer carving into memory. Leadership is not sitting in the seat of power. Leadership is standing up when sitting down would be easier. Leadership is speaking truth when silence would be safer. Applause thundered again, this time unrestrained. The hall erupted as Xavier stepped down from the stage. His phone buzzed, a message from Lyanna Brooks, his wife. I'm watching live. I'm purder than ever. But don't forget dinner with the kids tonight. They need you as much as the world does. Xavier smiled, peace filling his chest. He knew every great battle out there began with the small values within the family. The next day, he was scheduled to fly again from Atlanta to San Francisco. Same flight number, same route. Flight 25117. At gate B23, the check-in agent, a young South Asian woman, bowed warmly. Welcome back, Mr. Brooks. Thank you for what you've brought to this airline and to the industry. Seat 2A is ready. No suspicious glances, no bitter whispers, only respect. Xavier boarded the plane, In first class, Captain Patrick O'Neill greeted him with a firm handshake. "It's an honor to fly with you again, Mr. Brooks. In the past 6 months, our airline has changed greatly." "Not just the airline, Patrick," Xavier replied, his eyes alike. "The whole world." The plane lifted off, rising into the deep blue sky. Through the window, Atlanta shrank, but in Xavier's heart, a great belief expanded. True change could begin with a single seat taken away, as long as one had the courage to stand up and reclaim it. He remembered his father's words. Sometimes silence is complicity. Know where the line is. And today, looking out at the horizon, he thought, I did not stay silent, and that line has finally been redrawn. The aircraft climbed higher, leaving gray clouds behind. Ahead, the sun blazed, a sign that from now on, passengers on any flight would be treated under a single principle. Dignity is untouchable. There are flights that only take us from point A to point B, but Flight 25 carried the entire world to a different destination. Justice from a first-class seat that was taken away. Xavier Brooks transformed a moment of injustice into the spark that ignited reform across an Enwood industry. The question now is no longer whether he kept seat 2A. The question is this: if one day you were judged not by your effort or your achievements, but by the color of your skin or your appearance, would you stay silent and accept it? Or would you rise and change the system? If this story resonates with you, hit like to show your support, share so others can see it, and subscribe so you won't miss the next stories, where moments that seem small carry the power to shake the entire world. And leave your comment below. What would you do if you were in Xavier Brooks' place? Because sometimes it only takes one person brave enough to stand up to rewrite the rules for all of us.